Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome. My name is Michael Lappin, and I'm the founder of BeginX, a UX career accelerator based on real mission-driven client projects that helps people who know UX basics transition into the field in one of the most efficient ways and without quitting their current jobs. What we're going to cover today is how to transition into UX and land your first role without quitting your job and without breaking the bank. So meaning essentially how you can do that for only a fraction of what you would typically spend while if you chose to attend a full-time school or a boot camp. I'm quite excited to explore the UX career transition journey, best practices with you guys. We'll go over the entire journey step by step and also cover quite a few examples of how people did it successfully. So there's quite a lot of content to cover, and we want to make sure it's super useful to you. So we'll also have a section at the end of the presentation where we'll briefly cover our own offering because it can be a great opportunity for some of you. Of course, that is completely optional, and you do not have to stay for that part if you don't want to. There's a lot of material, and we'll also cover some common questions about the different phases of that career transition along the way. So let's get going. Before we jump into the details of the process of how to actually make this transition, let me quickly show you some proof that we actually know what we're talking about. So far, we've run multiple cohorts and helped a lot of people get hired by all these wonderful companies that you see on the slide. So we have seen and studied very many people who went through this entire transition. So let's quickly go over some specific alumni case studies who landed UX jobs successfully. First up is Ahad. Before UX, Ahad worked as an architect. He learned UX basics by reading books, articles, videos, and consuming anything he could about UX. Then, while still working in architecture, Ahad also did some personal UX projects in order to build up his portfolio. To build up his hard and soft UX skills and gain experience, he received training and mentorship from UX professionals, collaborated with the team, and helped the startup design their onboarding experience. Ahad became a more marketable candidate basically by improving his team collaboration and presentation skills and gaining real experience. After that, he started looking for UX roles and landed a UX job only about a month later. Next is Kerry. So prior to UX, Kerry worked in sales and operations. She then started learning about UX and consuming a lot of content online through videos, courses, and articles. Then she took a part-time UX basics course through GA, I believe, and plunged into practicing and building herself up. She collaborated with the team on a real client project for a startup while receiving training and guidance from industry practitioner mentors. She also worked with a career coach and networked extensively. Kerry then got hired as a UX researcher at JP Morgan, and her latest UX role is a senior UX researcher at American Express. Next up is Eduardo. Before UX, Eduardo worked as an industrial designer. He already had a solid understanding of design basics, but also did some additional UX learning through a couple of books and online. While still being employed at his old job, he collaborated with the team on 2 real client projects while receiving guidance, mentorship, and training from UX industry practitioners. Afterwards, he got a product designer role at a startup called PercentApp, and later got hired by bigger tech companies, including Teachers Pay Teachers and Olo. Next up is Robbie. Robbie previously worked as a teacher. When he decided to transition into UX, he started learning by taking a part-time online course, reading books, and participating in UX events. Later on, he also practiced and advanced his skills and experience by collaborating on 2 team client projects while receiving training and mentorship, all while still working at his day job. After a few months of hard work, he got hired as a UX designer by Cutting Labs, which is a B2B software company. Let's look quickly at Mengyi. So Mengyi worked in marketing and also did some graphic design as part of her responsibilities. She actually had a business degree from NYU, then learned UX foundations online through platforms like Lynda, currently called LinkedIn Learning, and Interaction Design Foundation. She further built up her hard and soft skills by participating on the real client projects. While collaborating with mentors and team, she persevered with her job search and got hired into a product design role at Viewlift, which is a tech startup. She grew quite quickly and is currently already a senior product designer at a company called Ultra, an HR tech startup tech company. So, who this session is best for. So let's cover who this training session is best for to ensure we use everyone's time productively, right? So it is best for you if you're looking to transition into UX in one of the most efficient and affordable ways without quitting your current job or other commitments that you might have. You might already know UX basics, or you're willing to learn those independently. So you may already know the essentials from your experience, background, education, or other courses, or you are one of those folks who are really motivated and can learn those basics independently online. But even if you do not know those yet, this session will still be really useful for you. You may be someone from a design, research, creative, tech, or related background. If you're not, you will still find this really valuable, but the transition overall will take a bit longer for you to make compared to those guys. You're motivated and committed. This is not easy, right? So it's a lot of work. So you should be one of the folks who are not afraid to work hard to attain their goals. So you probably want to switch careers and become a user experience design professional, right? So you want to find a UX job at a great company and increase your pay. You want to do interesting work and have great opportunities in a high growth field. You want to be in demand and have better job security and high and steady income. You want to have more professional experience and have an edge in your job search. So you may be not sure what the best way is to make this career switch. There is a lot of information, but it's not clear on how to best navigate this whole path. It may take a lot of time and trial and error to figure it out. You may not have an opportunity to quit your job and attend a full-time expensive bootcamp. You might already know design fundamentals and feel like attending bootcamp would mostly just rehash the theoretical stuff you already know. You may not have any real work experience in UX. If you already tried searching for jobs, for example, you might not be getting a lot of responses, and most employers say that they need someone with a little more work experience. You may not be sure how to go about this whole search process. Your portfolio may still be a bit weak and only have hypothetical or student projects. So you may be concerned about wasting lots of time and money and not taking an effective path for making this career transition. You may also be concerned about getting stuck and not being able to make this career switch at all. Or you may be concerned that you will not have an edge in a competitive job market among candidates with more experience. Finally, you might also be afraid of just going broke by getting into tons of debt and then being able to find a job. So I want to put these fears to rest and tell you that if you are motivated and committed to work hard, it is possible to make this career transition efficiently without losing months of income and having to spend tens of thousands of dollars. You may just be starting on this career transition journey, right? And are quite confused on how to go about this overall. You may have started learning independently, taken a course, or even obtained a degree and still cannot land a job. You may have tried working on your own hypothetical projects, freelancing or volunteering, but got stuck. You may have planned to create an effective portfolio, but made very little progress in months. You may have applied to tons of jobs, but got very few, if any, interview invitations. Do not worry, this may actually not be your fault overall. You may simply be unaware of the right ways and strategies to actually go about this effectively. If you suspect that there must be other options to transition into the field besides quitting your current job and losing months of income and paying tens of thousands of dollars, you're correct. If you suspect that the majority of employers and recruiters do not really hire UX professionals without any experience, you're correct as well. If you notice that there are not too many junior UX roles, that is also correct. If you suspect that after you take a typical UX course without building any of that professional experience, you may have a hard time landing a UX role, that is often the case as well. However, again, do not worry, there are many approaches you can take to solve these particular problems, which we'll cover today in this session. If you dislike this broken way of starting a new career and the whole no job without experience and no experience without a job catch-22 problem, and the fact that often after spending thousands of dollars on education, no one still wants to hire you. Us too. If you're someone who already comes from a design or related background and knows the foundations and main UX principles, and you feel like going to a traditional school or boot camp will simply make you pay thousands of dollars to learn what you already may know, it is quite reasonable to think that way as well. So I also wanted to cover who this is not for, right? So this is not for folks who are not committed, motivated, or willing to put in a lot of effort. Those who do not consider themselves team players or self-starters. It is not for people who do not want to learn by doing. And it is not for folks with constant negative attitude who cannot stop complaining about things. And so if you're one of those folks, it does not make much sense for you to continue in this session. So feel free to leave at this point. So next, what we want to cover is, so here's the core concept of today's session, right? You can transition into UX efficiently and without quitting your current job, losing months of income, paying tens of thousands of dollars, and wasting months of or years. If you already know UX basics, design basics, you do not have to waste money on learning what you already know. If you're motivated and committed, you can build yourself up to be the candidate employers want and market yourself effectively to get hired. Most career switchers or advancers don't properly understand how the ecosystem works. They're unable to turn themselves into highly hireable candidates employers want without spending a fortune and or huge amount of time. So before we get into the detailed steps, here's a quick background on myself and our company for credibility reasons. I'm not saying this to brag or anything, just want to give you some background. So my name is Michael Lapp, and I'm the founder of the company called BeginX, a part-time UX career accelerator based on real mission-driven client projects that helps people transition into UX roles. So since a long time ago, I always found the overall learning and development area quite fascinating and loved how it could propel people to amazing opportunities. I also enjoy helping people understand how to navigate through that and get to those opportunities. So at first, I just helped my family, like my little sister, cousins, friends, etc. And many of them actually told me that I should be a career counselor. I did not really go that path at that time, but I always knew I want to start something on my own. So then after finishing UC Berkeley, I have been working in tech for quite a few years and gained pretty extensive experience in software sector and research, analysis, design, products, as well as executive roles. During that time, I helped startups and multiple Fortune 500 companies design, implement, and improve technology solutions, and also collaborated frequently with C-level executives. And in all of my roles, I constantly ran into a problem that everyone was looking for experience all the time to get someone hired into a new position. So ultimately, I decided to pursue the dream I had, and while leveraging my talent and experience, and I went on a quest to build an effective solution to this problem. I first started on the side while still working full time because I had to have income to support myself and my family. Through that, I also realized how important being able to keep one's job and income is for many people, and who want to change careers because they simply cannot just quit and lose that income because it is a huge risk. So we conducted tons of research and worked on and iterated on this solution for several years, and until we got to a point where we had a strong offering that works well, and have been helping people effectively ever since then. This is just a picture where we ran a workshop together with Jared Spool, one of the best known folks in the entire UX space. We do not have any formal partnerships, anything like that. This is just a joint workshop. We did it at a UX conference in New York. So far, we've run 9 program cohorts and helped over 90 people get hired. Our grads went on to work for many well-known companies that you see here, like Coach, Google, SiriusXM, JP Morgan, Facebook, many others that you can see on the slide. And this slide, our advisors includes professionals from all these great companies like Google, IDEO, Frog, The Economist. And The organizations that we collaborated with are also listed here. So we have collaborated with quite a few of them, by ranging from New York City Mayor's Office of Technology and Innovation, who we organized a UX hackathon for, which was sponsored by Google, to different Techstars Startup Weekend events, where I mentored multiple times, to NYU, where we also ran events and hackathons, and many other companies which we collaborated with on running UX events. So step one, jumping into the actual steps of how to transition into UX successfully. Starting with the end in mind, you need to understand where exactly you need to be highly hireable by potential employers and how you will actually get there. So here's the old way to switch careers, right? And the main mistakes and issues people make, right? First you decide to start a new career, right? So you read about it and jump into learning and skill building. The job sounds exciting and you want to get started ASAP. You think about switching a career as just typical learning and then job searching. So instead of starting with understanding what it really takes to get actually hired in that role, where you need to be a grad candidate, you just find some program or a course or college and start learning, right? In some cases, you may also quit your job and lose your source of income, but you realize you may need to sacrifice that in order to make this career transition happen, which seems reasonable. So you kick things off and things are fun and exciting. So then you spend a lot of time and money on learning. So you learn the foundations, maybe the more advanced stuff, a lot of theory and concepts, and likely do some hypothetical projects. Then you start the job search by applying to lots of companies. Finally, you're done with the learning and are excited to actually start the new career. So you begin the job search by applying to lots of companies. Some people get lucky and actually find a job or internship, but the vast majority realize along the way that almost nobody wants to hire them. Things get much less exciting, and the process can get quite frustrating and demoralizing with lots of rejection and little hope. So after a few months, you then try to figure out how to become more marketable so you can finally land that job. And then after wasting months or even years, a ton of money, possibly getting into lots of debt and almost going broke, some people might actually get completely demoralized and give up on this whole career transition altogether, while many others finally start trying to figure out what they are doing wrong and what do those picky employers actually want. So then you realize that you do not have the key qualifications most employers look for. Things are not fun anymore because you realize that you already spent so much time and money and you still do not even have many of the qualifications company look for and do not meet the experience requirements and are stuck trying to get there. And then finally, you build yourself up and possibly get a job, right? So again, some people might just give up here and not even get here, but many others, after lots of time has passed, finally do land a job. So the old result is basically if you make it through all these frustrating phases and do not give up or have to quit this pursuit for financial reasons, you should land a job at some point. However, months, if not years, have been wasted along the way with a ton of money, potential lots of debt accumulated. You could even have been afraid of going broke along the way, experienced lots of chronic stress that could even have negatively impacted your health. So not the best way to really start to switch a career. A new way and better way is basically to start with the end in mind, right? To understand where exactly you need to get first to be highly hireable by employers and how exactly you will get there. So essentially, you want to UX this whole career transition journey and think from the standpoint of an employer. You want to become a candidate who employers look at and think, this is definitely someone who can solve their specific problems and hit the ground running and bring value to our company, right? So, and employers need validation and proof that you can actually do that, which they look for when recruiting and evaluating your application. So here's a quick overview of the key competencies that you need to gain. We'll explore all these areas in more detail on the following slides. So some of the key areas are obviously hard UX skills, softer UX skills, real experience, usually 3+ case studies, a portfolio that shows the case study skills and experience, resume and online presence that tell your story, UX interview and storytelling mastery, and finally, master effective UX job search strategies. So how did we come up with these? Well, definitely not out of thin air. So here's what we did. We basically interviewed and analyzed hundreds of candidates, identified who had the most success in getting hired faster and why, interviewed about 30 employers and hiring managers to understand what they're looking for, analyzed job postings to identify typical employer requirements, and ran over 50 or so events with both candidates and employers, interviewed them, and gained insights on what actually works best. So essentially, we used the UX process and did a ton of research to identify the key roadblocks people experience at this transition journey and gain insight on what is needed in order to design a better way to solve these problems and make the transition effectively. So then we synthesized all the research and identified common themes. And again, one of the key takeaways is to start with the end in mind and clearly understand what you need to achieve to be really attractive to employers, right? So you can actually get hired and not just learn a lot of stuff and then get stuck. So understand how exactly you can become highly hireable candidates that employers want. So you know where you need to be, right? We kind of we mapped out the the end state, like the competencies that you need to have. So let's explore a simple framework for how you can actually get there. Here's a high-level overview. We'll dive into each of these phases in a bit. First, you learn the essentials, obviously, foundations of UX, right? So the key principles and concepts, the UX process, main methods, deliverables, tools, etc. So this is just a start. So we call the next phase practice and grow. This is probably the longest and most practical phase where most of your learning or of your real learning, skill and experience building will actually take place. Sorry. This phase is mostly about applying, practicing, learning things in more depth, in the process, advancing your skills and building real experience. Next phase is creating all the search assets. So this essentially involves packaging and presenting all the skills and experience in an effective portfolio, resume, and online presence. Key phase necessary to position yourself as an attractive candidate for your search. And finally, the final phase is search prep and execution, which involves learning, mastering effective search strategies, the UX interviewing process prior to actually kicking off your search. We found that a lot of people really like the product or service analogy. So the first two phases are actually quite similar to building a product, and we call them learn and build stage. So you can see them highlighted, the first two phases. The last two phases are very similar to marketing and selling of that product. So that is how we refer to this stage, right? So market and sell. Essentially, the first big mistake people make is they do not build a great product that is attractive to employers, which means you do not develop your skills sufficiently or you do not have any experience. And if the product is not great, it will be very hard, if not impossible, to market and sell it, even if you're a master marketer. The other big mistake is that people make is after building an amazing product, they do not devote much effort to really understand what marketing and sales is about. They think it's just having the skills and experience is enough, and then it's just a matter of applying to tons of jobs, meaning that they do not really understand any of the science behind the marketing and sales, which means they do not put enough effort in order to position themselves as an attractive candidate and do not learn what effective search strategies are and how to navigate the hiring process successfully. And if you do not do that, you can get stuck looking for jobs for a very, very long time if you get there at all. On this slide, you can see how the key competencies you need to gain map nicely into this whole transition journey. So you see when you can attain which competencies. This is essentially a high-level view of what you need to have to be highly hireable, a highly hireable candidate, and when you can actually attain that. So this is just a very simple slide that summarizes the whole roadmap and the different phases and competencies. So just to summarize, right, the first step is to start with the end in mind. Understand where exactly you need to get to be highly hireable by potential employers and how you will actually get there. Ensure you have a solid product before selling. Otherwise, you can waste months or even years. Once you have a solid product, it is key to learn, practice, and apply the principles and best practices behind the marketing and selling in order to get hired faster. So do not confuse what phase you're in. Understand where you are and what may be blocking you from making progress, and focus on what is most important at the moment. Do not spread yourself too thin, too much at one time, as that will yield very little progress. So next is learning the essentials. Step 2, learning the essentials. Here are some common mistakes. First is thinking that learning is the only main thing that you need to do, and then you will just get a job. So learning is actually just one of the important pillars for building a solid product that will make you marketable. Another mistake is performing more theoretical just-in-case learning, basically a whole bunch of stuff, most of which will not really be used. This can also take an indefinite amount of time and steal months or years from you without bringing you the results that you want. Next is assuming that just learning the foundations will get you a job. So even if you're coming from a design or research background, and it's usually not enough to get hired in the vast majority of cases. Another one is overpaying for courses that just teach you UX basics. So some folks may need to take in-person courses for learning the basics, and that is totally fine. Just do your research and do not overspend, because there are very many options with huge variations in price. If you can learn the theory and essentials online on your own, there are also very many free or cheap resources, and you can save a ton of money on that. If you do not avoid those mistakes, the results can be just spending a ton of time and or money just to learn the basics and not making much progress to actually starting a UX career. That does not have to be the case at all. So learning the essentials. So quite a few of you may already know UX, may already know the basics, and this step is also one of the more obvious steps. So we will not spend a lot of time here. But I do want to quickly cover a few things that you may find useful. So this is mostly about the basic hard skills, knowledge of the UX process, methodologies, key deliverables, and tools. During this phase, you can also do some exercises and small projects. Know the difference between upskilling/learning versus the career transition courses. So upskilling or simple learning courses are just that, to obtain those skills, and those are typically not designed to help you switch your career into UX. That is what career transition programs and bootcamps are usually for. However, upskilling courses can actually usually teach you the UX basics and foundations that you do first need to learn. Understand the different options available, right? So there is independent study, self-study courses, books, articles, which is usually the cheapest option. Some examples of self-study are platforms like Coursera, Lynda/LinkedIn Learning, Interaction Design Foundation, Udemy. Plus, you could also learn from books and articles, etc. These courses are usually quite cheap or even free, but you do not usually get much, if any, of any or any support or accountability, and have to learn on your own. There are also mentor/instructor-led online or in-person courses. So this type of courses provide support and guidance, as well as some accountability. And they're also much more expensive than the self-study ones. You can typically find these at colleges as continuing education UX courses. So, for example, in New York, and it's FIT or Pratt or NYU, or through training organizations and boot camps such as GA or others. Sorry. And there's also higher education, right? So obviously, that is an option as well, which is usually the most expensive option, but it can be well worth it if you not yet have a degree. So some real life examples. A lot of these folks learn UX essentials while keeping their previous jobs. So let's start with Eduardo, right? So as mentioned earlier, while working as an industrial designer, he learned UX basics on his own through a couple of books and by learning online. He highly recommended a book called The Project Guide to UX Design for user experience designers in the fields or in the making by Ruth Unger. So that's a recommendation he made specifically where he learned the basics from. Next, let's look at Sasha. So she took a part-time in-person evening UX basics course through New York Code and Design Academy. I believe they're no longer operating. However, there are many companies offering many similar UX basics classes. Kerry, she learned primarily on her own through self-paced online courses and reading books. She actually also read the same book as Eduardo, I believe, and she recommended Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman as well. This is like one of the classics in design. Finally, Kerry, so to learn the basics, she took a part-time UX course at GA, I believe, while still working at her old job. So let's briefly talk about the key points from this step, right? So first of all, this is just the start. It will not get you a job in vast majority of cases, right? So most of your learning and growth will happen when you start the next phase, practicing applying in order to grow. That phase will also take much longer than actually learning the essentials. Learn by doing as much as you can and try to get your first case study while learning the basics. If you already know UX basics or are coming from another type of design background, you can save a lot of money. Easiest phase to do independently online, and you can save a ton. If you're really motivated and can learn theory and concepts well independently, you can save a ton of money on this phase, especially if you're coming from another type of design background. So let's briefly address some common questions. How can I learn UX basics / foundations online without breaking the bank? It is possible to save a lot of money while learning the foundations. You can use platforms like Coursera or edX for free or cheap access to lots of university courses. You can also use LinkedIn Learning, which used to be called Lynda before LinkedIn bought that company, or Interaction Design Foundation, or Udemy, and also through books and articles. How long can learning the basics take? So this really depends on you and the amount of time you have available and your motivation and commitment. If you fully immerse yourself and do like 15-hour days, you can probably do this in only like 4 weeks, right? If you can learn part-time only, it is usually possible to do that anywhere from like 1.5 to 4 months or so, depending on your background. So again, if you're coming from another type of design background, you have an advantage because you already know a lot of the principles. How can I save money with UX career transition if I come from a design or related background? So to kind of continue on this earlier question, if you come from a design related background like graphic design, architecture, fashion design, research, etc., it will be easier for you to make this transition than for someone coming from unrelated fields, because you may already know a lot of the design foundations and processes, have related experience and transferable skills, which means you do not need as much learning education as someone coming from a totally unrelated field. So you can save a lot of money because you mainly just need to build a UX portfolio and learn how to position and market yourself to employers. This type of background is actually Beginning's sweet spot because we can help you make this transition for a fraction of the cost of full-time bootcamps. So we'll also talk about this in the next section, and things will become more clear. So next phase is practice and growth. Becoming a candidate employers want to hire before marketing yourself. Let's briefly talk about the old way and common mistakes. So not building a great product before starting to market it to employers. essentially not focusing on learning and building on what is actually needed to be an attractive and marketable candidate. Another one is paying lots of money for courses where you already know the majority of the content because you can't take just the piece that you need, right? So especially if you're coming from a design or research related background. Not focusing on mastering the crucial softer skills. Often these can be even more important than the hard skills during a search. That is why team collaboration, presentation, client management are listed on the majority of job descriptions. Not getting any real experience before starting to market yourself. Experience is listed on pretty much any job description. So if you don't build it, it can be extremely hard during a job search. This is pretty much the traditional way of trying to start a switch a career. And this is also the reason why it can be so tough to get your first UX role. Spending most of the learning time on theory and hypothetical projects, small student projects, and solo work. So some theory, of course, is important, but UX is quite hands-on, and most of the actual learning will happen when you start practicing what you learn. So hypothetical projects are fine in the beginning, but their value in your portfolio is quite small compared to real experience. You do not need to be able to perform the work. You do not, to perform the work on your own. However, ability to collaborate in a team is vital to your success in this field, and that is why it is listed in almost any job description. So you want to look as professional as you can when you're looking for work. Some people may get away with just hypothetical projects in their portfolio, but you will likely have a hard time competing with others. Work on any client projects that you can get instead of ones that give you valuable case studies and make you marketable. So that's another mistake. The common mistake is spending a ton of time is just doing a lot of freelance work without really discerning whether this will really get you closer to your goal. So the old result is basically, again, spending lots of time and money and then still not being very marketable without any experience, which can result in months or even years of frustration because nobody wants to hire you. So the new way is basically becoming a candidate employers want to hire before marketing yourself. Build, advance, and deepen your skills here in this phase. So learning by doing and context-based learning is most effective usually. UX is a very hands-on field. This is a hands-on phase where most of your learning will actually happen. It will also take much longer than just learning the basics and theory. Let's briefly look at some real-life examples. So Ahad, in order to practice and grow, after first learning the basics, Ahad then worked on a few personal projects to build up his hard skills along with his portfolio. So then, similar to Rachel, he worked with a team and helped a medtech startup design their onboarding process. Their team covered all the phases of the UX process, from initial conceptualization and research all the way to iterating on their higher fidelity prototype. So this allowed Ahad not to just build up the hard skills, but also to develop the key softer skills like team collaboration and presentation, along with gaining real experience, which he could put on his resume and portfolio, and then talk extensively about in interviews. Rachel learned basics and some hard UX skills through a part-time mentored online course, where she also worked on her case study, which was hypothetical. Then she collaborated with the UX team while getting mentorship and hands-on training from industry practitioners and completed an end-to-end UX process client project with a company that repurposes flowers that would otherwise be thrown away by providing those to organizations and people in needs like orphanages or hospitals. And she helped design software that would help this organization work much more efficiently. So she had regular interaction, regular client interaction and presentations. Then later on, she worked on another real startup client project with a team. She has done all of this while still working at her old job. This allowed Rachel to build up her hard skills, softer skills like client management, gain real experience, and get several comprehensive large case studies, which made her quite marketable and gave her a competitive edge among other candidates transitioning into the field. Kerry. So after Kerry picked up the basics from her part-time course, she actually tried searching for UX jobs, but without much luck because she had no real experience and it was hard to demonstrate to employers the key softer skills. So um, Kerry also worked on a team for a small startup in the event space, covering all the key UX phases while receiving expert training and guidance from UX industry mentors. This also allowed her to gain the key competencies that are listed on almost any UX or product design job description, like real experience, teamwork, meeting facilitation, and client management, which made her an attractive candidate. So next, building up your hard skills, right? Understand the UX process and phases well, and be able to produce the deliverables for each of the phases, right? So this is key here. One of the first parts of this phase is basically understanding the UX process and umbrella, right? And being able to produce deliverables in each of the phases of this process. After you know the basics, it is good to start putting those skills into practice with small design projects. This phase is pretty straightforward, and interestingly, this is what many people think is like the only thing they need to learn to get a UX role, but it is only one of those areas to make yourself an attractive candidate. You also need to get proficient with the tools. So the tool logs you see below are typically some of the most common used in the industry, like Sketch, XD, Figma, plus InVision for prototyping. Um, Project-based learning typically works best. You can also do various design challenges or attend hackathons to practice and build your skills. But keep in mind, these smaller projects will not be as valuable for your portfolio. So the main goal for those is just to practice and build up the skills. Hard/technical UX skills is basically just the start, right? So a lot of more traditional schools basically focus just on this, the technical UX skills. This is a mistake because in order to get a candidate hired, there are several other important areas that actually need to be built up. So softer skills are absolutely key. As you can see, softer skills can be found in abundance on job descriptions, right? So often these make up over half of the overall requirements on a job description. This is also one of the reasons employers often ask you behavioral questions during interviews and give you various tests and test exercises and assignments. So softer skills are indeed critical. So not building softer skills that are crucial in your job search and during the interviews is a huge mistake, basically. So these are extremely important, even often even more important than the actual hard skills. Based on lots of employer interviews we conducted and job posts analyzed, here are some of the most common soft skills employers actually look for. Empathy and curiosity is definitely very important. One of the most mentioned ones. Team collaboration, this is huge. If you cannot collaborate with a team effectively, it will be extremely hard for you to succeed in the UX role. Client and stakeholder management, interaction, understanding business, and justifying your design decisions is big as well. Presentation, so basically ability to present your work to clients or colleagues in an effective way and convince them. Facilitation, you'll be likely running lots of workshops and meetings, so being able to facilitate those effectively is absolutely key. Communication, influence, and persuasion. This is huge, as you will need to be able to clearly explain your research findings and reasoning behind your design decisions and be able to get your clients, managers, or stakeholders on board. So these are a must to practice and develop if you want to actually land a UX job. How to build up those softer skills. So these skills are mostly built through hands-on practice and experience. So what you need to do is just learn some theory first through online courses, books, and articles. So this is probably about 10 to 20% of the effort, and then just get a ton of hands-on practice applying that, because this is how you will mainly learn. So next part is real experience is absolutely key, right? So you want to show that you have real experience. It is listed on almost any job description, even entry-level ones. Companies want proof that you have done it in real life and can hit the ground running. That's why experience is so important. If you have done it well for someone else, in their eyes, basically drastically increases the chances of you being able to do great work for them. Some mistakes related to real experience. So not building any real experience and trying to market yourself to employers. However, this is not your fault, as this is the typical traditional way of starting a career, right? So I've spoken with quite a few folks being stuck for this reason. They just keep applying and sending their resumes for months, if not years. And essentially, it is similar to just keeping banging your head against the wall and using a tactic that does not really work while expecting a different result to occur for some reason. So overdoing hypothetical projects and thinking it will get you hired, while doing some student passion and solo hypothetical projects can be useful, doing only such small projects and doing too many of them is not likely to get you very far. So these can be good for preparing for interview design challenges, which we'll cover a bit later, or just practicing your skills. Those typically won't be that useful for your actual portfolio or experience building. You want to look as professional as you can when you're looking for work. So some people may get away with just hypothetical projects in their portfolio, but you will have a very hard time competing and can get really stuck for months or even years. How you can actually gain that real experience, right? So the good news is that having a full-time job in the field is not the only way to gain that experience. And you can solve the no job without experience and no experience without a job catch-22 problem. So here are some options. Volunteering is definitely one of them. Pro bono consulting, which is similar. It may just be hard if you are just starting out because you are very new and the organization you help may not know much about UX either, but it's still doable, just requires initiative, motivation, and strong communication and persuasion skills. Internships. So this can be tricky because the good ones where you will actually do interesting work, get mentorship and grow can be as hard to find as actual UX jobs. Unfortunately, often these are mainly reserved for students, but it is possible, right? So just be aware of tons of internships where you just do menial or very narrow tasks and will basically not really grow and get valuable case studies. So we'll cover this in more detail in a bit as well. Another option is freelancing, right? So just trying to do some freelance work. And entrepreneurship, right? So you can do something on your own and then later showcase it in your portfolio. So gaining real experience, here are some tips and guidelines. A few key things you want to ensure this could work well for you. So you do not have to quit your current job to build that real experience. That is some good news. Doing it part-time is totally fine and will still look fine on your resume. It is important that you can provide value to the organization, right? Because otherwise, even if you do not have to pay, even if they do not have to pay you, it may not be worth it because it may be a huge investment of time from their side. So you cannot just come in and expect them to spend a ton of time and teach you if your skills are totally lacking and you can't provide much value yet. So before trying this, learning the essentials and picking up some skills is important. Also, this might apply to only some people, but do not be jealous if that they're getting value, right? If this company is getting value, and you're doing the work pro bono, you're benefiting from this work in a relationship much more than you would from doing a hypothetical project. So appreciate the opportunity and aim to provide a ton of value within reasonable limits, of course. If you do well, you're likely to build a great relationship, get strong referrals for the future, or they might even hire you themselves. So ensure that the work is also highly beneficial to you. That's obviously very important as well. On the other hand, right, it is also key for you to manage this engagement effectively and ensure the work you do is actually highly beneficial to you. So you're working on interesting, challenging, and sizable project. So it's not just it's not 2 days long or something like that, covering many phases or areas of the UX process. This is a must because if the work does not provide with great experience and case study, you're much better off finding another project that does provide that. Right, so very important thing to look at if you volunteer or do pro bono work. This is actually the advantage of volunteering or pro bono work over paid work. So you have much more leverage in actually shaping your project, and company cannot just boss you around and limit what you do as much as they could if they actually hired you and were paying you a lot of money. So you provide value and work pro bono, so you have more say in actually shaping the project, like covering different phases of the UX process, setting your own hours, etc. So this is very important, and you have to make sure the project is sizable, covers various phases of the UX process. Always think how the work will ultimately look in your portfolio and what employers may think. And finally, confirm in advance and in writing that you can actually showcase the work in your portfolio. So this is very important to do, so you don't waste your time and actually get the benefits you are looking for. So some common mistakes related to case studies. Thinking that taking one course with a hypothetical UX case study will get you hired because you have other design experience, or supposedly you already have the skills. Usually this does not really happen. There are exceptions, of course, and some folks may get lucky, but that is an exception, not the rule. The exception is usually that case study is one real and large project. Thinking that the more the better and showcasing too many small case studies, that's another mistake. Doing a lot of UI only projects and that basically do not cover any other UX process phases. So UX is not just about visual or UI design. So while doing a ton of tiny projects might help you improve your skills for that particular phase, or prep better for interviews if you do it right, it will not be very successful for the case studies in your portfolio, actually. Some case study guidelines to be more hireable. So have at least 3 case studies. A lot of people ask how many case studies should I have to be able to get hired. Again, we've done a ton of research in this area and interviewed hundreds of people who went through the journey. Usually the consensus is that you need at least 3. We are not yet talking about marketing yourself and how to structure and showcase those in your actual portfolio. Here we're still in the learning and building phase, and this is about understanding how much and what type of work you need to do to become quite marketable. Ensure your case studies are sizable. So each is at least a month or so or 2 in or more in duration. So this is a bit subjective, of course, depending on how much work you're putting in daily or weekly. So this is just a ballpark. Essentially, you need to ensure that the projects are sizable and not just something that you did in a day-long hackathon, for example. So larger projects will also look much better on your resume or LinkedIn when recruiters or hiring managers are evaluating you later. Ensure every case study covers at least a few phases of the UX process. Again, I'm not talking about small design exercises that you will need to practice for the interviews or to practice skills, but the actual projects that you will have as case studies in your portfolio. So some case study guidelines, some more case study guidelines to be more hireable. Coming back to real experience, right? So try to have at least 2 projects with real clients. While we could simply try to cheer you up and say, yeah, just complete a basic UX course with a hypothetical project and you're good to go, we prefer being more honest and transparent here. You already know how most companies and open roles require candidates with experience. So same thing applies here. To avoid wasting a ton of time trying to market yourself while your product is not that great yet, getting this real experience one way or another could really help you. This can really speed up your job search. The more clients work you can actually show, the more professional and experienced you will look, and you want to be able to stand out among your competition. Collaborate with a team. This is really important because tech is a team sport, and working with a team is quite different and much more challenging than working on your own. You want to demonstrate that softer but critical skills to employers and prove that you can do that effectively. Document everything throughout thoroughly while you're working. So this is absolutely crucial. If you don't document what and how you're doing as you go, creating your portfolio and writing case studies will be much more painful and take several times longer because it will be hard to remember what you did when, why, and how. Save yourself some time and avoid the headache and document as you work on the project. So let's sum step 3 up. Um, First, you basically gain solid hard UX skills. Then you build up softer skills. Then you also gain real experience, and you need to have 3 or more sizable UX case studies. Here are some common questions that we often get. So, how to find companies to volunteer for? Here's what you can do. You can talk to friends, talk to startup organizations or accelerators. They often have lots of companies who need your help. Just contact companies and offer to do some work for them. How do I advance my software skills? It's mostly done through hands-on experience, hands-on practice, right? So this will go hand in hand with your practice and experience building. Do internships really work for gaining real experience? Yes, if you can get a good one. But you may run into similar challenges as with obtaining your first job. Lots of requirements and competition. Another problem with internships, and even with some jobs, frankly, that you may not really learn much or do decent, sizable work that will look great on your portfolio. If you're if you're at a top design school or program, you may have much better chance of getting a great internship. Often, for many others, it is a good idea to build yourself up a bit more and become more hireable and marketable, even prior to trying to land an internship. Can freelancing work for building experience? Yes, it can be a good option. You just might run into similar challenges as with internships. So often you might just get some UI work because a lot of UX is in-house or reserved for more experienced pros. So not for those who are just starting out. So you just have to may just take some time, but it's possible. So the next step in our journey is step 4: create irresistible job search assets that show employers that you're an amazing candidate. So here's the old way and some common mistakes. Not understanding that asset creation and job search are essentially marketing and sales, and not learning the science behind that. Creating a basic portfolio in resume instead of optimized and effective job search assets that will get employers attention. Spending too little time on this and not learning applying the best practices for creating the assets. Not dedicating much time and resume, since portfolio is most important. Not getting user industry practitioner feedback and not iterating. So finally trying to figure out everything on your own. And the old result from this basically approach is that assets that do not work well and do not get much employer attention, causing you to waste months of your time and lose many potential opportunities in the process. So here's the new way. It's basically creating irresistible job search assets that show employers that you're an amazing candidate. How did we come up with these guidelines? We interviewed about 30 plus employers and hiring managers, ran events with senior UX professionals to explore this particular topic, interviewed and analyzed hundreds of candidates who had the most success with getting hired. And you can see the logos of companies from which we interviewed people from. All right, so let's look at some examples. Coming back to a HUD, right? So this said, I'm gonna switch to a HUD's portfolio really quick. So okay, so here is a HUD's portfolio, right? So as you can see, right, and again, we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, right? I'm just going to give you a couple of very quick examples of how UX portfolios are typically structured. So first you see it's pretty simple and clean, right? So here's the overall structure, right? So you have the home page. He has his work here. He has about and his resume as well. So if we'll look at his about page, right? So it's pretty interesting, right? So there's like unusual, cool picture. So he talks about how he was an architect and turned product designer, basically telling his story. Aside from design, right? So he's pointing out that he loves making music, and that is probably related to him getting his first role at SiriusXM. So let's look at one of his case studies. So the one he did in the program is called Frontier Health. And here's the overall structure, right? So he points out, it's basically just a summary, and it's all about the process, right? It's never, UX portfolios are never about just, final results or prototypes. It's all about showing the entire step-by-step process and explaining why you did what you did, right? So he summarizes his role, deliverables, kind of just overall summary, points out his team, like who was on his team, and the goal of the project, right? And then he basically describes all the key phases that they did for this project, right? So like research, competitive analysis, synthesis of that research. So you can see a lot of pictures, right? So pictures are very important to kind of show your process and what you did during that project. Design studio, moving on to wireframing, prototyping, showing the findings, explaining as he goes along. So you see that it's basically, again, I'm not going into a lot of detail, to any detail here at all, just showing you the overall structure of how a UX case study typically looks. Yes, his resume, right? So it's very simple, it's very clean. If you look at his work page, right? So you can see that it's, again, very simple, right? So he's currently at Facebook, right? So when you hover over, basically shows the name of the project or the company. And just give it a summary. Very clean, very minimalist. Okay. So let's also take a quick look at Eduardo's portfolio. All right. So as you can see, right, it's a relatively similar structure, right? So he has his work page, there is contact page, he has his resume here as well, and this is me, this is his about page, right? So if we go into about, so he has this picture that looks pretty professional, and he talks about his process. So he has some cool, interesting stuff, and it's still summarized nicely and neatly here. So if we come back to work, we're going to quickly explore his repeat roses project. So as you see, he first has this nice executive summary in this like infographic style, which is really nice and clean and shows you like what's the project brief, what's the project about, the process, the outcome, and the solution, right? So this is like a trailer version, right? So as sometimes the methodology to show your work in your portfolio, it's like a trailer versus the film, right? So first you show the summary, and then you actually show the more detailed case study. So keep scrolling to learn more, and here he dives into the actual challenge, into the actual project, right? So he talks about his role, what the challenge was about, were the assumptions, what they did, how they did the ethnographic study, shows proof with all the pictures, what they did. Talks about the interviews, how they did affinity mapping, the methodology, different types of analysis. So basically all these research methodologies and research synthesis methodologies like journey maps. Then they went into user flows, did the ideation, sketching, content map. So all the key phases. This is a very comprehensive project here, and all the way to prototyping, right? And then you can also click here to actually test the prototype, to see the prototypes, and then talking about results, which is very important. Testing insights, going all the way into the more visual side, which is basically talking about the style guide, and then final iterations. So he actually show, and then he talks about all the takeaways, right? So what they learned and potential next steps, right? So again, the key takeaway here, if you're very new to this, right, is basically UX portfolios are all about the process, right? It's not, or UX case studies, right? It's not about just showing your final deliverables. So that's like one of the key takeaways in a very quick time that we're devoting to these examples. So let me switch back to the slides. Okay, so let's talk about some takeaways. So essentially, you need to create a portfolio that shows the case studies, skills, and experience that we talked about. Treat your portfolio as a UX project, right? So keep in mind your users, who are hiring managers, recruiters, etc., and their goals, needs, and pain points. Very important. Get feedback from others and test it out and iterate. Research others' portfolios before creating yours, so to better understand best practices and synthesize. Do not waste your time reinventing the wheel. Just synthesize, improve, and customize. Show your process. Ensure it is a UX portfolio, not just a UI portfolio. Meaning, do not just show wireframes and a polished prototype. You should cover multiple phases and you went through and show what you have done and why at why each decision was made, what you learned, and how you move forward. Write it all out. Um, what UX methodologies did you use and why? Why did you learn? What did you learn from user research, synthesis, and how did you drive your future design decisions? Hiring managers also need to understand why you did what you did. So this is your chance to lay it all out for them. Showing the process helps you showcase your thinking and how and why you make those decisions. It is key for employers to see because this helps them evaluate you as an applicant. So, and you also demo your soft skills and real experience with your portfolio as well. Ensure your portfolio has great information architecture and is easy to scan and understand quickly. As often a recruiter or hiring manager making the first pass through a set of portfolios may not have more than 5 or 10 minutes to look it over. So if yours is hard to scan, they may just pass on your application altogether. So you want to create a portfolio that, again, shows the case study, skills, and experience. So it's important to show your contribution and give credit in team projects, as you've seen in those examples. If you worked on team projects, that is awesome. It's great that you worked in a group and together came up with an incredible solution for the users. But what did you do specifically? So what were your specific contributions? Did you make any mistakes? What did you learn from that? And how did you move on? Point that out. Make sure you also give credit to your team. If employers see this as a team project, but you say nothing about them and take all the credits, you will definitely not look good. And it may be a turnoff for your potential hiring manager. Show the messy, not just the polished designs. Hopefully your project doesn't just highlight high fidelity wireframes prototypes. So showing off your work at all stages of the process gives you opportunities to articulate your design decisions, weave in feedback from stakeholder presentations and user testing. This also adds to the story you're telling and telling the reader like where you started and how did you got to that finish line. Clearly highlight your best practices. Once you complete more UX work, make sure you showcase the ones that clearly highlight your best projects. Once you complete more UX work, make sure you showcase the ones that you're most proud of and those that best represent you as a designer first. The rule of thumb, though, is to lead with your strongest project first. Ideally, the more comprehensive one, where you explain your research, design direction, failures and mistakes, and dive deep into the explanation of your thinking and whys for each of the steps. Create a resume and online presence that demonstrates the skills and experience. So portfolio is key, but resume is very important as well. Even though resume may not be as important for designers as a portfolio, it is still key because sometimes employers or recruiters can use resume as the initial filter. So not creating an effective resume is a big mistake. Ensure the resume matches your portfolio and includes those case studies. So you don't want them to look at your resume and portfolio and see two different people, or not be able to find what you show in your portfolio on your resume. You want your user's experience, who is recruiter or hiring manager, to be great, right? Ideally, you should have as many real client case studies as possible, so you can put those in professional experience section, which will be a huge competitive advantage for you and help you land way more interviews. Highlight your transferable skills. Usually you have many more useful and transferable skills than you think. So various things you have done before may simply be called differently. So for example, if you have done requirements gathering as a business analyst, that can be closely related to user research. If you have done user acceptance testing, that may be almost the same as usability testing in UX. If you have mapped business process flowcharts, that can be very similar to task or user flows and so on. So also remember about all the soft skills, right? Maybe you did some facilitation before. Maybe you collaborated with a team. Maybe you did presentations. Think and clearly point out all the skills that could be used in UX. This is your responsibility to tell a great story here, so no one else will do it for you. Use industry terms and keywords. So sometimes recruiters would just use keywords from job descriptions and search for candidates. That way, in resume database or LinkedIn, you want to come up with those searches, right? So recruiters also, or hiring managers, may be scanning your resume very quickly, looking for those keywords. Similar to the previous point, study UX job descriptions and make a clear parallel of what similar type of activities you have done. Pepper in those keywords to your position as a much better match for UX roles. Showcase the key soft skills. Remember how we talked about all the soft skills? So again, ensure you point all of those clearly on your resume and LinkedIn. Study your user needs well, using job descriptions, and present yourself in the best possible light. Show really client work in the experience section. If you have done real work with real companies, make sure it is listed in professional experience section and not as some other extracurricular activity or something. Whatever the terms, be it contract, a full-time, a part-time, a volunteering, etc., whatever other terms, work is work. And the key part is that you have done real work. It is part of your actual real experience. Highlight that clearly so you're again presented in the best possible light and can compete well in the job market. So you also want to ensure your LinkedIn profile shows you in the best possible light as well, right? So show yourself as a UX professional and make sure your LinkedIn is benefiting you and basically not the other way around. You make your LinkedIn profile in line with your UX-focused resume. Again, you don't want your users to be totally confused or disappointed when looking at your various assets and profiles. If you cannot update your LinkedIn, so make sure it at least does not hurt your search, right? So in some cases, you may not be able to update LinkedIn due to concerns about your current employer, etc. If you're really concerned about that and cannot just change settings as needed, then make sure your LinkedIn is at least not a turnoff for potential employers, meaning they look at your portfolio and it is amazing, and then they find you on LinkedIn and there's pretty much nothing there about UX, right? So in that case, maybe just set it to private or something like that so that it does not harm your search. And recruiters do not perceive you as someone not looking like a UX professional at all. There's a whole book devoted to creating and using your LinkedIn profile called How to Write a Killer LinkedIn Profile by Brenda Bernstein. How to Write a Killer LinkedIn Profile by Brenda Bernstein. So finally, ensure any other social media profiles make you actually look better and do not hurt you either, right? So it seems somewhat common sense, but so many people get burned by this. You want those to make you look great for employers and not affect your professional image in any way, right? So if there is anything personal you don't want potential employers to see, and make sure those profiles are set to private. So to summarize step 4, creating irresistible job search assets that show employers that you're an amazing candidate. Essentially, first, you create a portfolio that shows the case studies, skills, and experience. Next, you develop a resume plus online presence that demonstrates those skills and experience. Here are some common questions. If I come from another type of design background, should I have just one portfolio with all my work from different types of design? You can have one portfolio, but it typically makes more sense to separate UX case studies from other types of work, so your potential employers are not confused and it is easy to see what you have done in what area. If I worked in another design field, do I still need to have 3 UX case studies? Typically, yes. Your design experience will no doubt help you as you position yourself as a designer with the years of experience, but you do still need to clearly demonstrate the UX work you have done and prove to employers you can do it well for them. If I'm still working full-time at my current job, what is the best way to show part-time UX experience on my LinkedIn or resume? So you can easily showcase your UX work in the same experience section in both resume and LinkedIn. What is usually much more important is not how many hours per week you're officially working, but what you're able to learn and produce, what results you accomplish, and what experience you gain. So someone in a full-time capacity might be doing way less challenging work and accomplishing much less than another person in a part-time capacity, right? So it is less about formal hours and more about the significance and amounts of the actual output that you're producing. What you want to convey to an employer is that you have done this type of work, you do have the skills and experience and can help them achieve similar great results. So moving to the next step. Now that you're an attractive candidate, you still have a lot of work to do to get a great UX role. And so step 5 is basically understanding and mastering effective search strategies and the UX hiring process, and then kicking off your search. Okay, so let's explore some the old way of doing things and some common mistakes. So viewing job search is simply applying and hopefully interviewing and getting a job versus marketing versus looking at it as marketing and sales. Launching your search before your assets are solid and can get employers interested. Not learning how to market and sell your services to employers and the science behind that. So not understanding and preparing for each of the various phases of this process. Another mistake is basically you just using lots of random search methods without understanding and clear focus on what is actually effective. Basically, not spending much time to understand the science behind the search and not learning mastering search, and just applying to a bunch of jobs instead of having a clear strategy. And not studying search strategy options in depth and not understanding which ones are actually most effective. So it's just not a great strategy. And then finally, couple more, doing all the search activities at once instead of focusing on a particular phase that is most important at the moment, and treating networking as just superficial business card exchanges and asking for help a few months after and only when you need it. Okay, so some more mistakes. Doing some general prep or no prep and just going to interviews hoping for the best. Working with a generalist, one-size-fits-all career coach who does not really understand UX interviewing specifics well. Using same tactics over and over without identifying the key blockers during the search. Not trying to study and understand companies' hiring processes. Not breaking down the UX specific interviewing processes and understanding the key phases and interview types. And finally, omitting presentation and storytelling studying and practice. And the old result is, right, if you apply these strategies we just discussed and make these mistakes, it's basically going to be a really long, painful, and frustrating experience, most likely. Not getting a job or wasting months, or it could be even years to get hired. So instead, a better way to prepare for your search is first to obtain a clear understanding of which UX job search strategies are actually effective and how they work, and master those. And then 2, study the hiring process and gain strong UX interviewing and storytelling skills before kicking off your search. So let's look at some quick examples. Kerry realized that networking is key for her to land a UX role, right? So she persevered and attended events to meet people on a regular basis. At one of them, she spoke with quite a few people, and then one person who happened to know about the UX job opening and introduced her to the team at JP Morgan. She prepared for interviewing process extensively and was able to pass the hiring process and land the job. Robbie, so there's a book called 2-Hour Job Search, which is really a great guide by Steve Dalton on how to search for work. So Robbie, we actually use this during the program and teach you those techniques. So Robbie really studied that methodology and put a ton of practice into understanding and preparing for the interviewing process. And by using that methodology, Robbie met an extensive amount of people by doing informational interviews, going to events, inviting people for coffee. One of the people referred him to Acadian Labs, and due to his extensive practice that he did before, Robbie was able to successfully pass their interviewing process. Chris, so finally Chris also realized how crucial it is to use effective search methods and then understand the interviewing process and prepare really well. So he networked and got introduced to a company that has a UX opportunity. So his strong interview prep also paid off and got him the role. Rachel also used a similar approach. She found companies she was interested in and networked extensively. After a lot of effort and a connection she made, introduced her to the hiring team at one of her target employers. And because she built herself up to be a great candidate and also practiced a ton to ensure she can actually nail the UX interviewing process, she landed the job. Okay, so you might be seeing some common themes here. So before I provide you the guidelines, I just wanted to reiterate how we actually came up with these guidelines. This is where this is coming from, right? So we interviewed 30 plus employers and hiring managers, surveyed over 50 plus accelerator program alumni, ran events with senior UX professionals to explore this topic, featured people from companies like Economist, Google, JP Morgan, Ideal, LearnBest, and many others, and basically interviewed and analyzed hundreds of candidates who had the most success with getting hired. So let's start with the first part. Obtaining a clear understanding of which UX job search strategies are effective and how they work and mastering those. Okay, so we surveyed hired folks and found out that about 90% of them, 90%, found their jobs through referrals, personal connections, or recruiters reaching out to them. And this might be telling you something, right? So this is very important insight. So here are some guidelines for effective search, right? So first, study job search methods and understand what works best so you can actually allocate your time wisely. Again, you want to understand what is effective and what is not, so you can focus on the right stuff and the right stuff that will get you the results and not waste months or even years using the wrong approaches. Based on our research, most candidates found jobs through employee referrals, personal connections, or when recruiters found them. Recruiters may be a part of the hiring company or a part of an agency or staffing firm, right? So this means that you either find roles or you're found by them. Again, just to reiterate, highly recommend you guys read the 2-Hour Job Search book by Steve Dalton. So he's a guy from Duke Career Services. Can be very useful for this phase specifically. So another great book is called Guerrilla Marketing for Job Hunters. And yes, all this reading may take some time, right, which you might not want to be doing, but so maybe a few days or a few weeks even, right? But it can ultimately save you guys months or even years, right? So it's very important. Next point, network and build relationships to find roles and generate referrals. Use events and informational interviews and make this a habit. Have top-notch online presence to be found by recruiters. So this comes back to creating really solid assets, what we discussed a bit earlier. It is crucial to have a strong LinkedIn profile with the right keywords, and that will help you show up in recruiter search results. So resume is also key here. Ensure that it also has all the keywords from the job descriptions. Then you could remove any sensitive or private info and upload it to various platforms like LinkedIn, Indeed, Dice, Monster, etc., that recruiters may use to search for candidates. Some recruiters get access to those platforms and basically regularly just download those databases with all the candidates. Startups often cannot afford more expensive platforms and instead may use sites like AngelList or Crunchbase. So finally, do not spend usually more than 15 to 30% of your time applying on job boards. This is what lots of people do, and employers get hundreds of applicants for each opening. So unless you really stand out in some way, the chances of hearing back are very, very slim. However, it often is helpful to use these job boards to get a sense of a company's hiring activity, right? And whether it would make sense to actually spend time on building connections there. Next, embrace rejection. So job searching is marketing and sales, right? And rejection is basically the name of the game there. Instead of getting upset, just expect it and learn to look at each rejection as being one step closer to achieving your goal, because it makes you stronger and it helps you learn progress and get better. So just accept it and grow from it. Uh, Pursue useful internships. As discussed earlier, so this can help you build experience. Just make sure you find a good internship that is valuable for you and that you can later showcase the work you do. It can be tough sometimes because many internships are open only to college students, and many have you do work that does not have any value for your portfolio. So just be careful there. Identify roles and industries where your past experience may help you stand out. It is a good idea to see where you may bring the most value to the table. What this means is trying to identify your low-hanging fruit areas, basically, or industries. For example, if you were a teacher before, you could be more attractive to education technology employers, right? Or if you have experience in architecture, you might have more success in something like urban planning or real estate-related companies and so on. Okay, so let's talk about main search methods. And we also like to refer to them as channels, right? Like in marketing and sales, you have distribution channels. So basically, these are different channels that you could use. Networking. Building relationships with those in the industry through events and informational interviews, also known as coffee chats or virtual meetings, which can help you expand your network, get referrals, and get hired. Make sure you help them as well. And it is a two-way street, right? So otherwise, you will not get very far. We'll talk about that, about this crucial channel on the next few slides as well. LinkedIn, for being found or to find roles. So we separate LinkedIn out from other platforms because one, it's based on our research, based on our research, companies and recruiters use it extensively. And two, LinkedIn can be used as a job board as well, a networking tool or a way to be found by recruiters. Recruiters, so mostly for being found. There are internal company employee recruiters and external ones that are usually part of a recruiting agency or a staffing firm. Most recruiters do not find jobs for people, they find people for jobs. That is why your assets like the LinkedIn profile and resume are so crucial. And finally, so next one is company sites. Another channel is applying directly on company sites. This strategy sometimes can also be effective, but only if you first identify the companies that are actually hiring by searching on Google, Indeed, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, etc. Then really dial in your resume and cover letter with all the keywords to ensure you come up in searches, and then submit these applications on a mass scale, like meaning like hundreds of these. You will essentially create the funnel, right? So this is usually the only, if you do it on a mass scale, then it can work potentially. And finally, job boards like Indeed, Glassdoor, Built-in, Dice, Monster, or AngelList or Crunchbase for startups. So let's talk about some networking guidelines and tips. Network effectively, make connections, friends, and build relationships. Again, this is a big mistake many people make when they do network, when they do not network effectively, do not build relationships, and don't do informational interviews. Networking is huge, so this shouldn't be new to you. Hopefully, as awkward and uncomfortable that it is, it's the best way to meet new people and find out about companies that may not exist online, right? So when you're competing with hundreds of other hungry candidates, very important. The face-to-face connections, coffee interviews, or casual meetup conversations are more effective than just sending your resume into the black hole of job postings. Networking should also not just be superficial business card exchanges, right? So instead, what you should do with it is expanding your and nurturing your network, right? So this is also crucial, and the majority of people completely miss this and either do not do it or do it wrong. So you need to actually understand what this means and how to do it. So continue expanding your network with the right people. If you do not nurture a network and help others and only reach out to people when you need something, right, it will not be effective and will just backfire. So this can also take some time to master, especially if you're not naturally a people person. So lots of practice is key here as well. If you want to succeed in this area specifically, right, we recommend the following books to you guys. Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. So especially the first few chapters on the overall networking mindset was really helpful for me personally. Give and Take by Adam Grant, and How to Win Friends and Influence People, an old classic book by Dale Carnegie. So, next point is do not wait. Start right away and make networking and connecting with people a habit. Relationship building can take some time, so start this right away, especially the informational interviewing part. This will give you more time to actually build those relationships, provide value to people, offer to help. Do not just be a selfish taker, give, 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 and you will get much more back actually. Leverage employee referrals. Most companies have mechanisms and refer and rewards for employees to refer people to get hired. So if you know people inside the company, they may refer you, which drastically increases the chances of you actually getting invited for an interview. You can often apply on their site, but an employee can still refer you or refer you to bring attention to your application that you already put in. Where to network? So here are some places where you can network. Events, so this can be in person or online. You can use platforms like Meetup, Eventbrite, Gary's Guide. We also send out our own newsletter focused on UX events specifically. Conferences, remember that if tickets are really expensive, you can also try volunteering to help. Hackathons, job fairs, LinkedIn. You can find your designers in your area to spark conversations with, and potentially even ask out for coffee or just do a Zoom chat, especially during COVID-19, right? So to make sure you're safe. Slack communities is another great source. And finally, reaching out to the design community and just to starting conversations with designers you admire. You can do that through LinkedIn, UX blogs, or other channels. Okay, so some more networking guidelines and tips. Definitely have a solid 30-second personal elevator pitch ready. So this will be quite handy when you're at an event or when you just randomly meet someone in an elevator or somewhere else, right? So it should quickly tell your story and cover your background and position you as someone people want to meet, talk more with, or even hire. So treat networking like soft interviewing. In the beginning, you want to practice, so you probably not want to go right to your dream companies. Once you do get some practice, keep in mind that the impression or connection you make will, with the first person, with the person is very important. Demonstrate that you're an active listener. You can hold a conversation and highlight your personality and interest. So then you can follow up with people you met for further discussion and conversations. You never know the doors these conversations can open. View networking as mutually beneficial relationship building. So you might be someone who really does not really like networking and see it as something superficial or it's sleazy. So I did not really like it at first, but after studying this area and reading a couple of books, my perception of it changed, right? So instead of looking at it as something superficial you don't like but have to do, look at it as just a way for you to meet people and build mutually beneficial relationships where you help others and they can help you. Remember that quality is really important. So if you're at an event, don't just try to quickly collect 30 business cards and talk to each person for a minute and move on, because you may just end up with 30 cards and no meaningful connections whatsoever. It is often much more useful to have 5 deeper conversations with people you connect, which is more likely to actually result in mutually useful relationships or even friendships. Be helpful. Don't just be a taker. People can often sense this taker's attitude. So and it is quite repulsive when you feel someone just wants to use you to get ahead somehow. So most of the time, that attitude will not get you very far. On the other side, helping others will also help you a ton in the long run. Do not ask about hiring or helping you right away. During informational interviews or when you meet someone at an event, focus should be on your contact, not you. Make the connection and build the relationship first. So if you start asking for help right away before they really know anything about you, you just risk alienating the person. So create a system to stay organized, execute your search efficiently, and achieve results faster. So make an action plan, what you are planning to do, and especially important when you're going to do it. Google technique called time blocking. Essentially, that means putting specific activities on your calendar and treating them like important appointments. This is extremely useful for productivity. If you do not specify when and set deadlines for yourself, it's much less likely to not get done, much less likely to get on at all. Keep track of all your search activities. So set up some type of organizer or tracking system for yourself. It can be a spreadsheet or some organization software like Trello, Asana, or something similar. Otherwise, it may just take you many times more time if you're not efficient with this process. You may also end up making costly mistakes like forgetting where you applied and interviewed and who you need to speak with, think or follow up, and that could cause you, to lose great job opportunities. So now let's explore the actual the second part. Study the hiring process and gain strong UX interviewing and storytelling skills before you kick off your job search. So here are the typical UX interview process stages, right? The common mistake is not understanding the hiring process well and not preparing for interviews and design exercises properly, and just thinking that now that you have hard UX skills, and that means you'll just automatically be hired. So first is phone screen with a recruiter or HR person. Typically, first screen call with the recruiter. This is usually mostly about your background and fit, and first potential company fit. If the first interview is passed, then there can be a phone interview with the hiring manager and UX team. So after that, face-to-face interviews with several team members or hiring manager. This is usually the longest stage. You will likely do a portfolio presentation or review. Sometimes you may get a design challenge like whiteboarding or on-site or take-home. There may be several interviews with 2 to 4 members of the team, which easily can take 2+ hours. Next, there can be follow-up face-to-face interviews. So sometimes there may be another interview during which you could present the take-home design challenge. There was one assigned, cover loose ends, etc. And finally, if you get an offer, you'll probably have another discussion about the pay, benefits, negotiation, etc. So pretty much any of the interview phases can include the following types of questions. Background and fit, so you and your resume and story. Behavioral, something like, tell me about your time when you had XYZ. Like when you had a conflict with a teammate and how did you handle it, for example. These types of questions aim to assess how you behave in different situations, if you can work under pressure, if you're a good team player, etc. Also, you may do case study walkthroughs, meaning providing an overview of one or more of your projects. Okay. So let's explore common interview types, which you all need to master. So another big mistake is not mastering your presentation storytelling skills. This is absolutely crucial. And even if you have very solid hard UX skills, if you cannot present your work and tell your story, you will usually not get hired. So background and fit. It's basically you and your resume and story. The next one is behavioral. Can be something like, again, tell me about yourself, about the situation that you solved, etc., problem that you solved. Like, when you had a conflict with teammates, etc. So they're assessing you again, how you behave in different situations, if you're a good team player or not. Portfolio and presentation walkthrough, where you essentially tell your story and go over one or several of your case studies using your portfolio slide deck or online portfolio. Whiteboarding design challenges, where you're given a prompt like design an app that helps parents select books for their kids, or any kind of prompt. And you need to whiteboard this challenge by essentially taking it through the UX process at a high level and demonstrating your thinking process and ability to think in your feet. So these are quite common. Based on our research, these are given usually about 50% or so of the time. Finally, there can be take-home design challenges as well. So similar to whiteboarding challenge, but you have more time to work on it at home and go into a bit more depth and then present your work to the employer at another meeting. These challenges are less common than whiteboarding, but you can still get one in some places. Okay. So some guidelines on how to master interviewing. Practice in order to master interviewing if you want to get hired, right? So get feedback and improve and iterating. Just keep doing that. You might get lucky, but in the vast majority of cases, it is just essentially what mostly determines if you'll be able to succeed in a challenging interviewing process and get the job. Learn about and prepare for all the different types of interviews. Write out the answers to the most common interview questions and practice out loud. Writing things out really helps you think things through much better. So if you do that, so your preparation will be much better. Don't try to write an answer for like every single question, but just try to do it for the most common ones that are important. So just Google something like most common UX interview question, you'll get a ton resources. There's a blog called UX Collective, uxdesign.cc, which has lots of resources on this. I have a few good questions for the interviewers. So remember to always have questions for those interviewers. This is also very important that demonstrates to them that you really want the role. And you also care about like what you would be doing there. So it also shows some of the skills like curiosity and your thinking process, right? So it's important as well. Do some mock interviews, definitely. Ideally with a mentor who is a UX professional, but you can also practice with a friend or someone you know. Learn and get great at storytelling. Based on our employer research, this is one of the most important skills to master as a UX designer in general, and it is absolutely key for interviewing process. So do some research and learn the art of storytelling. Here are a couple of books on this as well. There's one called Anatomy of Storytelling by John Truby, and another one called Wired for Story by Lisa Cron. Okay. So talking about more guidelines to master interviewing. It is useful to learn about psychology and persuasion and influence, right? So if you want to succeed in your interviews, it is very useful to study and boost your persuasion and sales skills. This is extremely important during the interviewing process. Read some articles and books on this topic. Another great book recommendation for you. So on this particular topic, it's called Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. So he spent 30 plus years researching this specific topic. So a good book. Prepare a clear and compelling personal pitch. So this is basically an answer to the tell me about yourself, your quick story. The answer should cover your quick story, background, accomplishments, and also briefly explain why you're interested in UX and why you're a great match for the role, for a UX role in general. Ensure that almost every sentence in your pitch conveys that you're an awesome candidate and gets your point earned. Have a typical 1-2 minutes version for interviews, but also come up with the shorter 30-second networking version that we discussed earlier. Also ensure you tailor this pitch for a particular role that you're interviewing for, so they see that you're an excellent match. Prepare for portfolio presentations. Learn how to tell your story and present your portfolio. Learn about storytelling and pitching. Ability to present yourself and your projects and tell a story in interviewing is just absolutely crucial. Practice with lots of design challenges. So practice, get feedback, and iterate. These are often an important part of the interviewing process, where you need to essentially take a problem through the whole design process, up to sketching or wireframing, prototyping. If it is specifically a take-home design challenge, obviously, there is a whole book about this called Solving Product Design Challenges. I don't remember the author, but just Google it. There's just one book on this, one popular book on this. So this could potentially really help you. Okay. So just a quick summary of this step 5. Understand and master effective search strategies and the UX hiring process, and only then kick off your search, right? So first, you obtain clear understanding which UX job search strategies are actually effective, how they work, and you master those. Then after that, you study the hiring process and gain strong UX interviewing and storytelling skills before you kick off your search. So this will really help you. Here are some common questions about this particular phase of transition. How often do employers give whiteboarding challenges or take-home exercises during interviews? So based on our research, around 50% of interviewers gave whiteboarding challenges to candidates, and take-home exercises are a bit less common. Is it effective to try to find a recruiter who will help place me in a UX role? So sometimes that could work, but actually most of the time recruiters work to help companies fill roles, not to help candidates get jobs. Many staffing firms are also focused on mid to senior level professionals, so it may be hard to find someone who will look for roles for you when you're just starting out. So however, what does work is presenting yourself in the best possible light, like a highly hireable candidate. Then recruiters are likely to notice you and can potentially submit you for an opening that they have. How do you prove and demonstrate your software skills to an employer? So typically employers first look for proof of those by looking at your portfolio, resume, or online presence. For example, proof that you work successfully with real clients and collaborated with the team. Then they will likely ask questions and request you to talk about those experiences during the interviewing process. And moreover, we'll evaluate that by asking you to present and giving you various assignments that can test for those skills. Cool. So let's summarize this process. First, you start with the end in mind, right? Very important. If you don't do this, you may just lose a lot of time. Understand where exactly you need to be highly hireable by potential employers, and then how you will actually get there. Next, learning the essentials and foundations. You can do it without breaking the bank, as we discussed. Practice and grow. You need to become a candidate employers actually want to hire. Then you create the irresistible job search assets that clearly show that you're that amazing candidate. And then finally, you understand and master those search strategies and the UX hiring process, and then kick off your search. All right. So now let's explore the different options that you may be able to choose from to pursue this career transition. So option one is basically transitioning on your own, right? So essentially what some people try to do is to just learn independently for free or pretty cheaply, and then try to find volunteer, internship, or freelancing opportunities. So obviously this could be potentially the cheapest option. And we'll explore different pitfalls that accompany all the different options as well. So make sure you're aware before you pursue them. Even though this is the cheapest option, right? So you would have to navigate, it is doable, right? But you would have to navigate and figure everything out on your own. So you're pretty much in a vacuum, and this can get quite lonely and mentally taxing. And again, this approach can take a very long time if it happens at all. It's possible, but it can take a pretty long time because you're completely on your own. Because here are some of the potential pitfalls and disadvantages. So you'd like any accountability, right? Because you're on your own, there is no structure, support, accountability, and deadlines. And this option requires tremendous discipline and motivation. So this can work, but usually only for a very small percentage of people. You could take a very long time, many months or even years. So even though this option is cheap, it is not cheap in terms of your time. So due to the points mentioned, this will likely delay your progress by months or years if you get there at all. Okay. Another option, right, is basically enrolling into a traditional full-time or part-time career transition bootcamp. So let's start by exploring full-time bootcamp options, right? And just to clarify, this can absolutely be a great option for some folks, especially if you're brand new to any type of design and are not coming from other design, research, creative, and similar roles, and you don't have any related higher education. Plus, most importantly, you can afford, if you can afford not to work for a few months. However, if you're someone coming from a design-related background, or already know the basics, or can learn those by taking a foundations course independently, this will likely not be the best option. And here's why. Um, it's so you would pay a lot of money and have a huge opportunity cost, right? So if you cannot quit your job and do not have the funds, it is simply not really an option, because you pay a huge amount of money. And even if you do quit your job, then you will likely lose many months of income. The total cost of tuition and lost wages can easily add up to like 35 to 70 plus K. You may spend quite a bit of the course time on just UX foundations. So basically, you pay to learn what you may already know. If you already know design foundations or are coming from a related background, a large chunk of the course and your tuition may be spent on learning things you already know. And at the same time, you may still not gain some of the key attributes of a highly marketable candidate. You would typically gain zero or very little real experience. So most likely it will not give you much real experience. Some bootcamps do offer a short real client projects at the end, but it can often be like maybe 10% of the whole course, while when job searching, it is usually one of the most important factors. This means your portfolio may not be that strong, and it may be harder for you to stand out among other candidates in the job market. So second part of option 2 is part-time boot camps. So again, a traditional online part-time boot camp can also absolutely be a great option for some folks, especially those who are quite new to the design field and can work well independently for months. However, again, if you already know the basics or coming from a design-related background or have higher education, it will likely not be the best choice. And here's why. You will pay less than the cost of full-time program and will not have to quit your job, right? So this is the main advantage, right? This is the main advantage of any part-time bootcamp, and this is a big one, right? So this is important. You may spend quite a bit of time of the course time on UX foundations, similar to full-time bootcamps, right? So again, if you know the basics, you may end up paying to learn what you already know. If you already know design foundations or are coming from a related background, a large chunk of the course and your tuition will be likely spent on learning the stuff you know. So while at the same time, you will still not have several of the key attributes of a highly marketable candidate. You would typically gain zero, very little experience. Most part-time programs do not give you any real experience. Very few may offer that, similar to the full-time bootcamp. That is usually a very short client project at the end of the course. So also maybe like 10% of the course or so. So again, when job searching, it can be very challenging because your portfolio won't be that strong, and you will have a hard time competing with other candidates because it is one of the most important factors. You would not get much practice and development of softer skills. It will most likely not be very effective for developing the critical softer skills like team collaboration, client and stakeholder management, and presentation. So essentially, you'll be spending a lot of your resources and time only on some of the things that are important for getting hired, like the hard skills, while allocating very little resources to other crucial things like the softer skills and experience that matter a lot in helping you land a UX role. So it just does not make a lot of sense, actually. You would likely spend a long time. So this option may drag out your progress for quite some time. So some part-time program can go up to like uh, 8 to 10 months or even longer. Some are also self-paced, and that is one of the reasons they can drag out, right? Because when there are no real deadlines and no structure to ensure you keep progressing, and you do it at your own pace, and that means there's potential for this to drag out for a very long time. It can get a bit lonely, especially given the fact that these courses run for many months. You will likely have a very limited exposure to industry practitioner mentors. With many programs, you have just one or maybe two mentors that you work with throughout the whole time. You can sometimes change them if you want, but it will not be basically a lot of exposure in pretty limited time. You may not get much value in terms of expanding your professional network because of these programs are based on individual work, and again, you typically just work with one or maybe two main mentors. And then ultimately, it may still be quite pricey as well. So finally, you can also apply to Beginner's UX Career Accelerator, right? And enroll if you're accepted. So obviously, Beginner's is another option. And for those who know UX basics and come from other design, research, creative tech, and related backgrounds, or have a related higher education, this is honestly the best option because this accelerator was designed specifically for people like you. Again, it's not the best option for everyone, not saying that absolutely. But if you fit that persona, it is the best option. I will explain in more detail and show you why on the next few slides. Okay, so let me just reiterate who BeginX is best for. So those who already know UX basics or willing to learn those independently prior to the program. So you may already know the basics from your experience of background education or other courses, or you're one of those folks who are really motivated and can learn those basics independently online. So those who look to transition into UX in one of the most efficient and affordable ways without quitting your current job or other commitments, the program works especially well for folks who come from a design, research, creative, or related backgrounds, and people who are motivated and committed. So this is not easy, right? Absolutely not saying it is easy. It is a great option for these folks, but it is not easy. It's a lot of work, so we're looking for folks who are not afraid to work hard to attain their goals. Okay, so let me just show you some examples of our alumni here. And a lot of the folks who we talked about earlier, right? So those folks are our alumni. So I'm just gonna recap of how they made these transitions, right? So Ahad, again, learned basics by reading books, articles, videos, and consuming anything he could find about UX. Then while still working in architecture, Ahad also did some personal UX projects in order to build up his portfolio, tried searching for jobs afterward, but it was tough, primarily because not having any real experience in UX. So during the program, he collaborated with a team and helped a medtech startup design their onboarding process. They covered the key phases of the UX process, from research to wireframing to higher fidelity prototype. This helped him build up and advance the hard and softer skills like team collaboration, presentation, and gain experience. And then after that, he started looking for UX roles and landed a job at SiriusXM about a month later. So let's talk about Sasha. Sasha was first thinking of becoming a developer, but then realized she liked UX design much better. So she took a part-time basics course from New York Code and Design Academy while working in a marketing capacity and doing some visual design. After doing BeginX Accelerator, Sasha finally finished her portfolio, built more real experience, learned job search best practices, and started actively looking for UX roles. And she landed a UX job within only 2.5 months of graduation. Next up is Robbie. So Robbie previously worked as a teacher. When he decided to transition into UX, he started learning by taking part-time online courses, reading books, and participating in UX events. So later on, he enrolled in BeginX Accelerator and worked on 2 client projects, all while still working at his day job, so saving a ton of money and not having to lose all that income. After a few months of hard work, he got hired as a UX designer by Caddy Labs, which is a B2B software company. So let's talk about Kirsty. So Kirsty actually made this transition in one of the most efficient ways possible. So she was working as a paralegal at a law firm before. Then she learned about UX and realized it would be a much better fit for her. Kirsty then plunged into learning UX foundations through self-paced online courses and reading books. While going through BeginX Accelerator, she collaborated with a team on an early stage startup client project. After equipping herself with the skills and experience, Kirsty started networking within her company and was able to gradually transition into a product design role. So she really did this very efficiently. but this is, I would say, this is an exception. I mean, we're not saying this is typical, right? This is an exception, but she did a great job. Okay. So Rachel previously worked in fashion design and learned UX basics through a mentored online course. I believe it was Springboard's UX Foundations course. Then she went through a BeginX UX Accelerator program and participated in an additional client project afterwards. She basically built herself up through through those projects and advanced her hard skills, built real experience and softer skills. In spite of moving to a different city, she started networking and in a smaller city in New York. So she actually pursued and networked there, and still landed the network successfully and landed the UX role. Eduardo. So before UX, Eduardo worked as an industrial designer. He also had a solid understanding of design basics, but also did some additional UX learning through a couple of books and online, which we mentioned earlier. While still being employed at his old job, he joined BeginX, where he collaborated with a team on 2 real client projects while receiving guidance, mentorship, and training from UX industry practitioners. Afterwards, he got a product designer role at a startup called Percent App, and later on got hired by bigger and prestige tech companies, including Teachers Pay Teachers and Olo, that have actually quite rigorous hiring processes. So he really persevered as well. Kerry. Let's cover Kerry's story briefly. So Kerry was working in business development and operations before that. She first took a GA part-time course where she learned the basics and later got accepted into BeginX Accelerator, and then got hired as a UX researcher at JP Morgan afterwards. Currently, she's a UX researcher at American Express. Okay. So just to highlight the key benefits of BeginX program for you. Essentially, when you're accepted in the program, you gain most of those key attributes of a highly hirable candidate that we covered besides the basics. So first of all, you'll plug into an ecosystem of accelerated career transition with guidance, clarity, and certainty of making the career switch effectively and without wasting months or even years trying to figure this out on your own. Accelerated combines the best elements of training, apprenticeship, mentorship, career prep, and networking into one comprehensive system. You'll build real experience that is crucial to landing a job with most employers. You'll build an advanced hard skills. You'll also practice and build the critical softer skills you can pick up in a textbook or on your own, such as leadership and team collaboration, presentation, and client management skills. We first help you become a candidate employers want by working on all the activities we covered in this training, and then we help you brand and position yourself by creating search assets according to the best practices. And you will not just learn theory about those, you will actually work on those in a hands-on format and iterate based on multiple rounds of personalized feedback, not from just a random career coach, but from actual industry practitioners who made those transitions successfully themselves. So this will help you nail the UX portfolio, resume, LinkedIn, and other online presence, and attract employers. You'll also master UX interviewing, storytelling, effective search methods, and hands-on practice, and get multiple rounds of personalized mentor feedback from practitioners. You expand your network by building relationships with the permanent and guest mentors who are all UX practitioners, your team, your cohort, and become a part of our mentor and alumni community. Our goal is to basically get you hired into UX role, right? So we support and mentor you even after you finish the program. Very importantly, you actually do not have to quit your job until you're hired into a UX role, right? So which means you do not need to lose your source of income and assume a ton of risk and potentially get into lots of debt. So you can save a ton of money by paying a fraction of a full-time bootcamp cost. Let me briefly expand on how that actually happens. So program is designed, first of all, using the UX process and focus only on UX to deliver the best results, right? So we first understood the users and the entire transition journey by interviewing tons of candidates and employers, broke down the entire process into the most important phases, understood the biggest roadblocks candidates experience, and created a solution that focuses on what is most important in order to achieve the results of landing a UX role. So that is done through 10 weeks of hands-on training and mentorship with a real social impact client, covering all the key phases of the UX process. You also get 5 weeks of career prep and personalized feedback on your UX portfolio, resume, LinkedIn, job search, interview, design channel, basically end-to-end UX hiring process. You get live weekly client interaction and mentorship from UX professionals from companies like Coach, Google, and ADP, and many others. There's hands-on practice and training and practice in team collaboration, client management, and presentation. Post-graduation, you also get one-on-one virtual career support, job search action plan, and accountability program to get you hired faster, and 6 months of post-graduation group virtual career support. There are extra team client projects after graduation available for you if you want even more experience or case studies. There's lifetime access to alumni mentor professional community and free events, and there is no need to quit your job, right? So you just spend a fraction of a full-time program's cost and keep months of income again. Okay. So in fact, our grads have done so well that we now actually offer a money-back guarantee. So you get your 3 case studies, start your search, and land the UX role within 6 months, or you get your tuition back plus an extra $200. Okay. So now, if you wanted to make this career transition before, by enrolling in a full-time bootcamp, right? It would cost you at least 15 to 17K plus several months of lost income to attend that bootcamp and several more months for the job search itself, since you would have to quit your current job, which could easily end up being another 20 to 40K for a total cost of anywhere from like 35 to 70 or more $1,000. If you enroll in a typical online bootcamp, it usually costs at least 6K and up to 15K usually. Most frequently, those programs run for quite a long time. Usually they don't help you build real experience, the softer skills like team collaboration, client management, and presentation, and only have very limited exposure to industry practitioner mentors, if at all. With Beginner's Career Accelerator, you only pay a fraction of the full-time bootcamp cost and still way less than even the most part-time online bootcamps. So if it sounds like you may be a good candidate, go ahead and request a free career transition consultation, or you could also just apply on the website. Here's what this consultation can help you with, right? So you'd get advice navigating your own career transition from experts who helped 90+ people get hired. You receive personalized advice from the executive program director who has a UX and product background, and it's not just a sales rep, like in many cases with many companies. You can ask questions about switching to UX career and how the program can help you. Ask questions about the program itself as well. Understand if you may potentially be a good fit for the program. And finally, the consultation is free and there is no any kind of commitment. So usually we do only about 16 to 20 or so such career consultations per month. And our program cohorts are quite small to ensure personalized attention. And each one usually only has about 12 people or so, and they fill up relatively quickly. So if you feel like you could be a good fit, and if you're interested in the next cohort, please act very soon. Finally, if you watched this entire video and made it all the way to the end, it seems like you may be someone who is quite dedicated. So to reward you for that, you will actually be able to get a $200 tuition credit if accepted into the program, of course. So to claim that credit, what you need to do is just request a free career transition consultation now. We really want to thank you guys again for joining and watching. Hope you found this useful, and we'll see you in the next one.